The massive crystalline dome of the Galactic Council chambers stretched endlessly above, its transparent walls revealing the swirling nebulae of distant stars. Inside this architectural marvel, representatives from dozens of alien species gathered. In their floating platforms, each one believing themselves superior to the countless worlds they governed. The air itself seemed thick with their arrogance, centuries of unchallenged dominance having bred a confidence that bordered on contempt for lesser civilizations. Admiral Kim Tommen walked slowly across the polished floor, his black military uniform a stark contrast against the brilliant colors worn by the alien delegates. His face remained perfectly calm, betraying nothing of the storm of emotions churning beneath the surface. Behind him, a small group of human representatives followed in precise formation, their movements disciplined and respectful. To the watching aliens, they appeared exactly as expected, primitive beings overwhelmed by the grandeur of galactic civilization. The Veltar representative, a creature resembling a massive insect with iridescent wings, hovered above the central platform. Its compound eyes reflected the chamber's lights as it spoke in a voice that carried across the vast space without effort. The species known as humanity has been granted the honor of recognition by the Hegemony Trade Federation. Your world, designated as Terra 3, will now fall under our protection and guidance. Kim stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind his back in a gesture of military attention. He had practiced this moment countless times, preparing for the mixture of condescension and barely concealed threat that would follow. The alien's words were delivered with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather, as if the fate of an entire species was merely a minor administrative matter. Your primitive civilization will be permitted to continue existing under the following conditions. The Veltar continued, its mandibles clicking with what Kim had learned to recognize as amusement.
Oh, great.
All trade with other species must be conducted through Federation-approved channels. Your military vessels will be restricted to your home system. A tribute of raw materials and technological samples will be provided annually. These terms are non-negotiable. The chamber fell silent as dozens of alien eyes focused on the human delegation. Kim could feel the weight of their expectations. Their assumption that he would either beg for mercy or make empty threats that would only amuse them further. Instead, he took a single step forward and spoke in a voice that carried clearly through the vast space. "We accept your terms," Kim replied, his tone respectful but firm. The words came easily, despite the bitter taste they left in his mouth. Humanity wishes only to coexist peacefully with the galactic community. We will comply with all Federation requirements. A wave of surprised murmurs swept through the chamber. The Veltar's wings buzzed with what Kim recognized as laughter. How refreshingly compliant it chittered. Most species require significant encouragement before they accept their place in the galactic order. Your people show wisdom in recognizing their limitations. Another delegate, a serpentine creature with scales that shifted color as it moved, slithered forward on its platform. Perhaps this demonstrates the value of our preliminary observations. The human species shows promise for integration, unlike the more stubborn civilizations we have encountered. Kim maintained his composed expression, while fighting the urge to remind these creatures that humanity had been observing them just as closely. Hidden sensors throughout human space had been tracking alien movements for decades, cataloging their technologies, their weaknesses, their casual cruelty towards species they deemed inferior.
Ow.
But none of that showed on his face as he bowed slightly. In acknowledgement, "We are honored by your acceptance," he said. "Our people understand the benefits of guidance from more advanced civilizations. We look forward to learning from your wisdom." The formal proceedings continued for another hour, with various delegates adding their own conditions and restrictions. Kim listened to each one, memorizing every detail, while maintaining his facade of grateful submission. The aliens discussed humanity's future as if the human representatives were not even present, debating the best ways to exploit Earth's resources and integrate its population into their existing power structures. Finally, the session concluded. With the traditional exchange of diplomatic credentials, Kim accepted the ornate data crystal containing the Federation's official terms, knowing that hidden within its seemingly simple design were surveillance devices and tracking systems. The aliens wanted to monitor humanity's compliance to ensure that this newest addition to their empire remained properly subdued. As the human delegation prepared to leave, Kim caught the eye of his aide, Lieutenant Park So-young. The young woman had maintained perfect military bearing throughout the proceedings, her face revealing nothing of her thoughts. She was one of the few people who knew the true scope of humanity's preparations. The decades of careful planning that had led to this moment of apparent capitulation, the journey back to their transport vessel took them through corridors lined with displays showcasing the Federation's power. Holographic images showed the subjugation of dozens of worlds, the transformation of proud civilizations into compliant tribute-paying members of the galactic community. Kim studied each display carefully, noting the tactics used, the technologies employed, the psychological methods that had broken the resistance of species far more advanced than humanity appeared to be. Once aboard their ship and certain they were beyond the range of alien surveillance. Park So-young moved closer to Kim. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she spoke. "Sir, the deep space monitoring stations have been tracking their fleet movements for months. We know the location of every major military installation in their territory. Our infiltration teams have mapped their supply lines, their communication networks, their defensive capabilities." Kim nodded almost imperceptibly, his expression never changing despite the significance of her words. Around them, the other members of the delegation continued their normal activities, maintaining the illusion that this was simply a routine diplomatic mission. None of them allowed themselves to smile or show any sign of satisfaction at how perfectly their performance had been received. "The Federation believes they have gained another compliant member," Kim said quietly. "Their arrogance blinds them to the possibility that any species might possess capabilities they have not detected. They see only what they expect to see, primitive beings grateful for their protection." Park So-young's eyes gleamed with barely contained anticipation. "The defense grid is fully operational, sir. Our deep space assets are in position. The manufacturing facilities have exceeded all production targets. We are ready for whatever comes next." Kim finally allowed himself the slightest of smiles, though it held no warmth. "Let them think we're weak, So-young. Let them believe their own propaganda about human limitations. The best predators are the ones their prey never sees coming. When the time comes to reveal our true nature, it will be far too late for them to prepare." As their ship departed the council chambers and began its journey back to Earth, Kim stood at the viewport watching the alien vessels that escorted them. Each one represented technologies that the Federation considered superior to anything humanity possessed. Each one carried crews that viewed humans as barely civilized primitives, worthy only of exploitation. None of them realized they were already dead. The dark void of space around Kepler 440b suddenly blazed with the brilliant flashes of ships emerging from hyperspace. One by one, the massive vessels of the Zelkan supremacy materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the distinctive bronze coloring that marked them as elite military craft. The fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, 36 destroyers, and countless smaller support vessels, all bristling with weapons that could reduce entire cities to ash within minutes. "Commander, da." Vextel stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon, watching the human colony grow larger on his main display screen. His reptilian features twisted into what passed for a smile among his species, revealing rows of sharp teeth that had evolved for tearing flesh. This would be another easy conquest. Another primitive species learning their place in the galactic hierarchy through superior firepower and intimidation. The Zelkan military doctrine was simple and effective: arrive with overwhelming force, make impossible demands, and wait for the inevitable cycle of defiance, resistance, and eventual surrender. Most species followed this pattern exactly, their leaders making brave speeches before reality crushed their spirits. The few who actually attempted to fight were destroyed so completely that word of their fate spread to other potential troublemakers. "Open communication channels to the human settlement," Vexel ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 worlds. Let us see how these primitive mammals react to proper military strength. The communication system crackled to life, and suddenly the bridge was filled with the image of a human male wearing simple civilian clothing. This was Colonial Administrator Lee Min-ho, though to Vextel, he looked like nothing more than another weak creature about to learn a harsh lesson about galactic realities. "I am Commander Vextel of the Zelkan Supremacy," he announced, his words carefully chosen to maximize intimidation. "Your illegal settlement has been constructed in territory claimed by superior beings. You will immediately evacuate all personnel and surrender 50% of your industrial output as compensation for this violation." Lee Min-ho listened to the demands with an expression that surprised the Zelkan commander. Instead of the fear or anger that Vexel expected, the human appeared calm and almost resigned. There was no trembling in his voice when he responded, no desperate attempts to negotiate or plead for mercy. "We understand your position, Commander," Lee said in a steady voice. "We have no desire for conflict with your people. Our colonists are already preparing for evacuation, and we can have the requested tribute ready for transfer within 6 hours." Vextel's mandibles clicked together in confusion. His tactical officers exchanged glances, their own expressions showing surprise. At this unexpected response, in all their previous conquests, no species had ever surrendered so quickly or completely. Usually there were at least token protests, demands for proof of authority, or attempts to buy time through negotiation. "No threats?" Vextel asked, his voice carrying genuine bewilderment. "No desperate pleas for mercy? No claims that your government will respond with force?" "We prefer to avoid unnecessary bloodshed," Lee replied, his tone remaining perfectly calm, even as hidden sensors throughout the colony began their work. Every electromagnetic signature from the Zelkan fleet was being recorded and analyzed. Weapons systems, shield generators, engine outputs, and communication frequencies were all being cataloged by equipment the aliens could not detect. The human evacuation proceeded with remarkable efficiency. Transport ships that had been hidden in the asteroid fields surrounding the colony emerged and began docking at the settlement's spaceports. Thousands of colonists filed aboard these vessels in orderly lines, carrying only personal belongings and leaving behind the infrastructure they had spent years building. Vextel watched this process with growing satisfaction. His reputation as a conqueror would only be enhanced by such a complete victory achieved without firing a single shot. The tribute payments being loaded onto automated cargo containers represented enough raw materials to fund several more military campaigns. The ease of this conquest would surely impress his superiors and lead to more prestigious assignments. What the Zelkan commander did not realize was that the departing human ships were releasing clouds of microscopic surveillance drones as they left the system. These tiny devices, no larger than dust particles, attached themselves to the hulls of the Zelkan vessels and began transmitting detailed information about their construction, their weaknesses, and their capabilities. The supposed colonists aboard the transport ships were actually intelligence specialists who had been waiting months for this opportunity. As they departed, they used concealed scanning equipment to map every detail of the Zelkan fleet. The weapons that could destroy cities were analyzed, and their power sources identified. The shields that could deflect asteroid impacts were tested, and their frequency patterns recorded. Meanwhile, the tribute containers held more than just raw materials. Hidden among the legitimate cargo were advanced sensor packages that would continue monitoring Zelkan activities long after the fleet departed. Every conversation, every tactical discussion, every strategic planning session would be recorded and transmitted back to human intelligence networks. Lee Min-ho maintained his performance of defeated resignation until the last human ship had cleared the system. Only then did he allow himself a slight smile as he reviewed the data being collected. The Zelkans had revealed far more about themselves than they realized, and their arrogance had prevented them from taking even basic precautions against surveillance. On Earth, in a facility hidden deep beneath the Korean peninsula, intelligence Director Choi Haijin studied the incoming data streams with cold satisfaction. The information was beyond anything human military planners had hoped to obtain. Every system, Every weapon, every defensive capability of the Zelkin fleet was being dissected and analyzed by the most advanced computers humanity had ever built. Their plasma cannons have a 17-second recharge cycle, she reported to the assembled members of the Defense Council. During that window, their ships are effectively defenseless against precision strikes. Their shield generators create a 2-millisecond vulnerability window during polarity switches that can be exploited by properly timed attacks. The tactical analysis continued for hours as more data arrived. The Zelkin tactical computers used predictive algorithms that could be anticipated and countered. Their communication systems relied on encryption that human quantum computers could break in seconds. Their formation patterns followed standard military doctrine that made them vulnerable to unconventional attack strategies, Admiral Kim reviewed. Each piece of information with the attention of a chess master studying his opponent's moves. The Zelkins had given humanity a complete blueprint of their military capabilities, and they had done so while believing they were demonstrating their own superiority. The fleet movements suggest they plan to return within 3 months, Choi. Hyjin continued her briefing. They expect to find a completely abandoned system ready for their own colonization efforts. Their confidence in our compliance is absolute. Kim nodded slowly, his mind already working through the implications. The Zelkins would return, expecting to find empty worlds ripe for exploitation. Instead, they would discover that they're easy. Victory had been an elaborate trap, and that the prey they thought they had intimidated was actually the predator that had been studying them. Send a message to the Galactic Council, Kim ordered, his voice carrying the same calm tone that Lee Min-ho had used with the Zelkin commander. Tell them we hope this misunderstanding can be resolved peacefully. Express our gratitude for the Federation's protection and our commitment to avoiding future conflicts. The message would reinforce the impression that humanity was weak and compliant, buying precious time for the final preparations. Soon, the galaxy would learn that appearances could be deceiving, and that the most dangerous enemies were often the ones who seemed the most harmless. The massive Zelkin war fleet materialized from hyperspace like a swarm of metallic predators, their bronze hulls gleaming against the star-filled darkness of space. War leader Thokomar stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Blood Sovereign, surveying the greatest military force his species had ever assembled. 312 vessels stretched across the void in perfect battle formation, each one bristling with weapons, capable of cracking planets. Thokomar's scaled hide rippled with anticipation as he studied the tactical displays. The humans had shown themselves to be weak during the previous encounter, evacuating their colonies without even attempting resistance. This time he would make an example that would echo throughout the galaxy. Any species that dared to reoccupy territory claimed by the Zelkin supremacy would learn the price of defiance. All vessels report ready for combat operations, announced his tactical officer, a younger Zelkin, whose scars marked him as a veteran of the Andromedon campaigns. The human mining station has been located at coordinates 7-7-Mark-4. Long-range sensors detect minimal defensive capabilities. The war leader's reptilian eyes narrowed as he examined the sensor readings. The human outpost appeared to be nothing more than a collection of industrial platforms and storage facilities. Exactly the kind of target that would maximize psychological impact while minimizing actual military risk. The destruction of civilian infrastructure would demonstrate Zelkin power while avoiding the potential complications of attacking military targets. Begin the assault with the mining station, Thokomar commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 12 star systems. Let the humans see what defying us truly costs. Make sure the destruction is visible from there. Other installations, the order rippled through the fleet as targeting systems locked onto the remote facility. Plasma cannons that could melt through starship armor swiveled toward the defenseless mining platforms. Energy weapons designed to penetrate planetary shields focused their deadly power on structures built for industrial production rather than military defense. The barrage lasted only seconds, but its effects were devastating. The mining station simply ceased to exist, vaporized by energies that turned metal and stone into expanding clouds of superheated gas. The brilliant flash of destruction was visible across the entire star system. A clear message that the Zelkan supremacy had returned to claim what they considered rightfully theirs. Thokomar settled back in his command chair, waiting for the inevitable surrender transmission. Human leaders would appear on his screens, begging for mercy and promising complete compliance with Zelkan demands. The pattern was always the same among inferior species. Initial defiance followed by the crushing realization that resistance was futile instead. Something impossible began to happen around his fleet. Space itself started to shimmer and bend as if reality was becoming unstable. The stars seemed to flicker and dance, their light distorted by forces that Zelkan science could not explain. Throughout the fleet, sensor operators reported equipment malfunctions as their instruments detected objects that could not possibly exist. War Leader called his chief sensor technician, her voice tight with confusion. I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies throughout the formation. Our instruments are detecting solid objects where our visual sensors show empty space. Before Thokomar could respond, the anomalies resolved into something that defied everything that Zelkans thought they knew about human capabilities. Ships emerged. From what they had assumed were dead asteroids and abandoned space stations, but these were not the crude vessels that intelligence reports had described. These were craft that seemed to bend light around themselves, their hulls reflecting and refracting the starlight in ways that made them appear to exist in multiple locations. Simultaneously, the human vessels moved with a precision that no Zelkan ship could match, flowing through space like schools of fish responding to a single controlling intelligence. Their formations were perfect, their timing flawless, their coordination so complete that they seemed to anticipate each other's movements. Before they happened, Captain Yoon, Jae-zoon commanded. The lead human vessel from a bridge that would have been incomprehensible to Zelkan engineers. Holographic displays showed the position of every ship in both fleets, while quantum computers calculated attack vectors and defensive maneuvers faster than biological minds could process. His voice remained calm and professional as he coordinated the assault, showing no emotion despite the magnitude of what was about to unfold. Focus fire on their command ships, he ordered through communication systems that bypassed normal space-time entirely. Disable their communications first. We want to isolate their individual units before they can coordinate a response. The human weapons that struck the Zelkan fleet were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, instead of the crude kinetic projectiles or simple energy beams that intelligence reports had suggested. These were devices that seemed to manipulate fundamental forces of physics. They cut through Zelkan shields, as if the defensive barriers were made of paper, penetrating armor that had been designed to withstand the most powerful weapons known to galactic civilization. Thokomar watched in growing horror as his mighty fleet began to disintegrate around him. Ships that had survived battles against the most advanced military forces in the galaxy were being disabled or destroyed by enemies that their targeting systems could not even properly track. The human vessels seemed to phase in and out of existence, appearing long enough to deliver devastating attacks, before vanishing back into whatever impossible technology allowed them to remain hidden. Impossible, Thokomar breathed as his flagship shuddered under impacts that should not have been able to penetrate its shields. Your species barely has interstellar capability. Our intelligence reports showed primitive chemical rockets and basic fusion drives. Yoon's response came through communication channels that the Zelkans had not even known existed. We've been studying your technology for decades, he replied, his tone carrying no trace of anger or hatred despite the violence unfolding around him. We simply saw no reason to reveal our own capabilities until now. The truth was even more devastating than the weapons being used against them. The humans had not been weak or primitive. They had been patient. Every encounter, every diplomatic contact, every seemingly innocent trade negotiation had been an opportunity to gather intelligence and analyze galactic military capabilities. While the galaxy's powers had dismissed Earth as a backwater world, human scientists and engineers had been developing technologies that made their own achievements look primitive by comparison. The Zelkan fleet's advanced targeting systems had been designed to track and destroy the fastest known spacecraft, could not lock onto enemies that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Their tactical computers, programmed with the combat patterns of every known species, had no response to strategies that operated outside all recognized military doctrine. Within minutes, Thokomar's flagship was crippled, its main power systems, failing as human weapons systematically destroyed every critical component. Around him, the greatest military force in Zelkan history was being methodically dismantled by an enemy that had revealed itself to be far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Emergency pods began launching from the dying vessels as crews, abandoned ships that could no longer defend themselves. Of the 312 vessels that had entered the system with such confidence, only a handful of escape pods would survive to carry the news back to the galaxy. The survivors would bring word of a species that had hidden its true nature behind a facade of weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal that Earth's children were not prey at all. They were predators. The crystalline chamber of the Galactic Council had never witnessed such chaos. Emergency klaxons wailed through the vast dome as representatives from across the galaxy materialized on their floating platforms, their usual composure shattered by the impossible reports flooding in from the outer territories. The air itself seemed to vibrate with panic as dozens of species struggled to comprehend what they were hearing. Intelligence. Chief Mordok of the Hegemony stood before the assembled delegates, his usually steady tentacles trembling as he delivered his briefing. The holographic displays around him showed tactical data that made no sense according to everything the galaxy thought it knew about human capabilities. Ship movements that defied physics, weapon signatures that violated fundamental laws of energy, conservation and defensive systems that seemed to bend reality itself. The Zelkan supremacy deployed their entire battle fleet, Mordok reported, his voice carrying the weight of devastating news. 312 vessels, including their most advanced dreadnoughts. Within 18 minutes, all but 7 escape pods were destroyed or disabled. Humans suffered no casualties and no apparent damage to their own forces. A wave of shocked silence swept through the chamber. The Zelkan military was considered among the most powerful in the galaxy, their ships equipped with technology that had conquered dozens of star systems. The idea that they could be eliminated so completely by a species that had been classified as primitive was beyond comprehension. Counselor Zephyria of the Veltar Collective materialized her analysis platform, her crystalline form reflecting the emergency lighting in fractured patterns. The weapon signatures recorded by the surviving Zelkan sensors show energy patterns we have never encountered. They appear to be using principles of physics that our best scientists claim are impossible. How did a species that we discovered only decades ago develop such advanced technology? The question hung in the air like a poison cloud. Around the chamber, military advisors and intelligence specialists were frantically reviewing their files. On humanity, searching for clues they had missed. What they found was even more disturbing than the tactical reports from the battlefield. "They've been watching us for decades," Mordok continued, his tentacles now writhing with agitation. "Our counterintelligence divisions have identified human agents embedded within our societies, our governments, our military installations. They speak our languages perfectly, understand our cultures better than we do ourselves, and have been systematically gathering intelligence while we dismiss them as harmless primitives." The revelations continued to pour in as intelligence networks throughout the galaxy began connecting dots that had previously seemed unrelated. Trade missions that had seemed routine were revealed to be reconnaissance operations. Diplomatic contacts that had appeared friendly were actually intelligence-gathering exercises. Cultural exchange programs had been cover for the systematic mapping of galactic military capabilities. War Marshal Kethfer of the Andromedian Coalition accessed his tactical displays, its armored form casting shadows across the chamber floor. The humans have been patient beyond anything we've encountered before. While we were cataloging their apparent weaknesses, they were studying our actual ones. They know the location of every major military installation, every supply depot, every strategic resource in our territories. The scope of the deception was staggering. For decades, humanity had presented itself as a struggling species capable of interstellar travel. Their ships had appeared crude, their weapons primitive, their military doctrine laughably simple. Meanwhile, they had been developing technologies that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children, playing with toys. Perhaps they weren't as primitive as we assumed, Kethfer suggested, his voice carrying a note of grudging respect mixed with growing fear. The question now is, what do we do about it? They've revealed themselves as a threat beyond anything we've faced. We cannot allow this to continue. The debate that followed consumed ours as representatives argued about response strategies. Some suggested immediate diplomatic contact, hoping to negotiate a peaceful resolution. Others demanded economic sanctions and political isolation. But the military leaders were unanimous in their assessment. Humanity had demonstrated capabilities that posed an existential threat to galactic stability. "We have no choice," declared Supreme Admiral Vexthera of the combined fleets. 6 major powers must unite their forces for an overwhelming assault on the human home system. We cannot risk allowing them to develop their technology further or expand their influence to other species. The decision was reached through a combination of fear and desperation. The Terran Federation, the Hegemony Trade Consortium, the Veltar Collective, the Andromedian Coalition, the Crystalline Dominion, and the Void Hunters would combine their fleets into the largest military force in recorded galactic history. Over 10,000 ships would converge on Earth's solar system, bringing enough firepower to sterilize entire worlds. As the massive armada began to assemble at rally points throughout the galaxy, intercepted human communications revealed something that chilled the council members to their cores. The destruction of the Zelkan fleet had not been humanity's full military capability. Intelligence analysts studying the tactical recordings realized that the human ships had been holding back, testing new weapon systems rather than deploying their complete arsenal. The implications were terrifying, and if the annihilation of the Zelkan supremacy's entire battle fleet had been merely a field test, what were the humans actually capable of when they decided to fight seriously? On Earth, deep within the mountain fortress that served as humanity's military command center, Defense Minister Han the Sol stood before a wall of displays showing the galactic response to their revelation. Thousands of alien ships were moving toward human space, their formations growing larger and more threatening with each passing hour. "They're mobilizing everything they have," she observed, her voice carrying the calm professionalism that had made her one of humanity's most trusted military leaders. "Intelligence estimates over 10,000 vessels from 6 different species. They're bringing enough firepower to crack continents." Admiral Kim studied the tactical projections with the attention of someone who had been preparing for this moment for decades. The galactic powers were doing exactly what human strategists had predicted they would do, responding to the unknown with overwhelming force. Assuming that numerical superiority would compensate for technological disadvantage, they still don't understand what they're dealing with, Kim said quietly. "They think we're just another species with better weapons. They have no concept of how far ahead of them we actually are." The Admiral turned to face the massive command center, where hundreds of human officers coordinated defensive preparations across dozens of star systems. Hidden bases that had been constructed over decades were coming online, revealing the true scope of humanity's military infrastructure. Weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids were powering up their systems. Ships that had been waiting in perfect stealth for years were beginning to move into position. "Then it's time to show them what we're truly capable of," Kim said, his voice carrying the finality of a judge pronouncing sentence. "Signal Captain Yoon, activate the deep space defense grid. Let them come with their 10,000 ships, Bill. Learn that numbers mean nothing when you're fighting an enemy that operates on principles they cannot comprehend." The message went out through communication systems that bypassed normal space-time entirely, reaching human forces positioned throughout the galaxy in mere seconds. The trap that had been decades in the making was about to be sprung, and the galaxy's most powerful civilizations were walking directly into it. The darkness at the edge of Earth's solar system suddenly blazed with the light of 10,000 suns as the greatest military armada in galactic history emerged from hyperspace. Ship after ship materialized in perfect formation, their combined mass creating gravitational distortions that bent starlight around them. The fleet stretched across millions of kilometers, a wall of metal and energy that represented the combined might of 6 civilizations determined to end the human threat once and for all. Supreme. Admiral Vexthera stood on the bridge of the flagship, Eternal Dominion, watching as her tactical displays filled with the signatures of allied vessels. Terran Federation dreadnoughts bristled with plasma cannons capable of melting continents. Gemini battlecruisers carried antimatter torpedoes that could crack moons. Veltar crystal ships hummed with exotic energies that could disrupt matter. At the molecular level, never before had such power been assembled in one place. All fleet elements report ready for combat operations, announced her tactical coordinator, a being whose species had perfected warfare across 17 galaxies. Long-range sensors are scanning the inner system for defensive installations and military assets. No. The sensor readings that came back were almost insulting in their simplicity. A few orbital platforms around Earth, some mining operations in the asteroid belt, and scattered patrol vessels that barely registered on their instruments. It was exactly what the galactic powers had expected from a species that had only recently developed interstellar travel. Where are their defenses? Wondered War Marshal Kethfer from his own command ship. Surely they must have prepared some kind of response to our arrival. The answer came in the form of a single transmission that reached every vessel in the massive fleet simultaneously. The source was a lone human ship, so small and unremarkable that the alien sensors had initially dismissed it as space debris. Admiral Kim Taemin appeared on their screens, his expression calm and professional, despite facing impossible odds. "I am Admiral Kim Taemin of the Terran Defense Force." His voice carried clearly through the communication systems of 10,000 ships. "You have entered our space with hostile intent. This is your final opportunity to withdraw peacefully." "Yes." The alien commanders exchanged glances of amazement. One ship against 10,000? The audacity was almost admirable in its foolishness. Some of them actually began to laugh, their various forms of amusement creating a cacophony of sounds across the fleet communications. "Human, you face the combined might of the galaxy's greatest civilizations," Vexera responded, her voice carrying the authority of absolute power. "Surrender now, and your species will be granted the mercy of continued existence under our guidance." Kim's response was delivered with the same calm tone he might have used to discuss weather patterns. "We have no desire for conflict, but we will not submit to threats. You've been warned." The alien commanders prepared to give the order to advance, expecting the human vessel to either flee or be vaporized by the first salvo. Instead, something impossible began to happen around their fleet. Space itself started to shimmer and distort, as if reality was becoming unstable. Stars seemed to flicker and dance, their light bending through dimensions that should not have existed. Then the human fleet revealed itself. Ships emerged not just from hidden positions behind asteroids and space stations, but from seemingly empty space itself. These were vessels that had been waiting in perfect stealth for years, their advanced cloaking technology making them completely invisible to every form of detection the galaxy possessed. They materialized like ghosts, becoming solid, their sleek forms appearing in impossible numbers throughout the empty alien formation. The human fleet moved with a coordination that defied everything the galaxy knew about military tactics. Each ship responded to the others as if they were parts of a single organism, their formations flowing and shifting with perfect precision. There were no communication delays, no coordination errors, no hesitation.
Ow.
They attacked as one mind controlling. Thousands of bodies, Captain Yoon Jae-soon commanded the human response from his vessel's silent thunder, his calm voice coordinating the engagement through quantum communication systems that operated outside normal spacetime. "Target their engines. And weapons only," he ordered. "We want survivors to carry our message back to the galaxy." The weapons that humanity unleashed were beyond anything the aliens had witnessed during the destruction of the Zelkin fleet. Energy beams that seemed to bend through hyperspace struck their targets before the firing ships were even visible. Defensive shields that had been designed to withstand the most powerful weapons in the galaxy simply collapsed under impacts that rewrote the laws of physics. But the most terrifying aspect was not the technology itself, but the restraint with which it was used. The human ships could have annihilated the entire galactic fleet within minutes, reducing 10,000 vessels to expanding clouds of plasma and debris. Instead, they systematically disabled each ship, targeting engines and weapons with surgical precision while leaving life support systems intact. Vexthera watched in growing horror as her mighty armada was methodically dismantled around her. Ships that had conquered star systems were being disabled like toys in the hands of children. The humans moved through their formations like apex predators among helpless prey, their attacks so precise and devastating that resistance was impossible. How are they doing this? She demanded of her tactical officers. Our sensors show energy signatures that violate fundamental laws of physics. Their ships appear to be moving faster than light without using any known FTL technology. The answer came as her own flagship shuddered under weapons fire that penetrated shields designed to withstand supernova explosions. The humans had not just developed superior technology, they had achieved mastery over forces that the galaxy's greatest scientists claimed were impossible to control. One by one, alien commanders began transmitting surrender codes as their vessels were systematically disabled. The proud fleets that had arrived with such confidence were now helpless, hulks drifting in space. Their crews alive but completely at the mercy of an enemy they had grossly underestimated. When the last resistance had been eliminated, Admiral Kim's final transmission was broadcast across all known space, carried by communication systems that reached every inhabited world in the galaxy simultaneously. His words were translated into thousands of languages, ensuring that every species would understand the message humanity was delivering. "We are not your enemies, but we will not be your victims," Kim declared, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. "We have shown you a fraction of our capabilities. We have spared your lives to deliver this message. Leave humanity alone or face complete annihilation. This is Earth's last warning to the galaxy." As the surviving alien fleets limped home with their tales of impossible defeat, the galaxy began to understand a truth that would reshape interstellar politics forever. Humanity had not been the primitive species they had discovered decades ago. They had been the apex predator that had chosen to remain hidden. Studying their potential prey with the patience of a species that had evolved on a world where survival meant being the deadliest creature in the ecosystem the galaxy had been warned, and it would not forget.